Hi everybody and welcome back to this week's episode of B2B NAV. And this week it's going to be quite a conversational topic with Ollie and John discussing, I guess, pricing and value billing in terms of the world of agencies alongside maybe the way quotes and prices are broken down by agencies. So this will be, I think, quite an agency perspective on things, but we welcome anybody's opinions or input in terms of maybe from client side as well of how you like to receive or see quotes and breakdowns and pricing structures. So I guess to start the conversation, one of the issues we come across quite regularly is obviously what I term like value billing, but in the sense of from an agency perspective, quite often we work by the hour. So that's how we work here at BDB. We have hourly rates that quite often are discounted, and we accept there's a level of overservice typically incorporated into the projects that we do. And agencies don't operate like solicitors. So it's not by the hour, every single hour gets billed that we work. But then quite a lot of the work that we do in agencies, and particularly on the creative side of things, John, I guess is, intellectual creativity, and it's not necessarily linked to the number of hours it's taking you. Sometimes it's the value that kind of outcome, and that could be a full rebrand, something as simple as a strapline, a tagline, depending on what you're working on, I guess. But what's your experience with that from the value side, John, in terms of trying to explain that or articulate that to clients?
It's a real tough one, because I think clients sometimes, not all of them, but some will kind of align the idea of, you can have some very functional creative outcomes and outputs, which are things like brochures, templates, fact sheets, and those are very easy to kind of quantify because they're quite functional.
Yeah.
And then equally from a creative output, you can have, you mentioned a strapline, for example, or a value proposition or a positioning or a brand kind of attribute that's going to last and have a value and a lifespan of, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, I think, sometimes for people to understand and correlate the idea of, well, why am I paying, I don't know, let's say €500 for a fact sheet, but you're asking me for 50,000 euros for words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the way I always try and explain it to people is you're not actually paying for those 4 words. You're paying for all the mistakes that the team have made over the last 20, 30 years to learn how to get to those 4 words. All the education, all the experiences they've had. You're paying for like 20 years of experience rather than 5 hours of time sat working on one project.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a really difficult one to kind of, I guess, explain and get people to understand. And the best way I've ever heard it explained is the story of a guy who used to help fix ships and in the docks of Newcastle back in the late 60s. And what happened was he would come in if a ship came into dock and there was a problem with the engine. He'd be the guy they called. And in one instance, a ship came in, it was in dry dock, and the harbour master said, look, this thing's not working. We need to figure out what's going on with the engine, and we just can't get it going. So go, right, well, we'll call so-and-so. So he turns up, he's got a little bag, and he rocks up to the shipyard, and he goes on board, and he has a little look around, listens to a couple of things, hears some pipes gurgling. About 10 minutes later, he opens his bag, takes out a tiny, world's tiniest little hammer, and taps one of the pipes. Turns the key, pushes the button, whatever they do, pushes the pedals. Engines roar into life. Perfect. Shakes a hand, off he goes. About a week later, his invoice arrives for kind of doing the work, and it's, I don't know, we'll pick a number, let's say £10,000.
Yeah.
So the guy from the shipyard's looking at it and goes, well, he was only here for like 20 minutes. Yeah. How could he possibly charge us 10 grand for 20 minutes work? So obviously he gets on the phone and says, look, I really need a breakdown of this because I don't know what to do. Yeah. I can't justify this and I can't put it through finance because I need a breakdown. Okay. So another invoice arrives, and this invoice is broken down. And essentially what it says is, and it's the £10,000, time on site, 20 minutes, £50. Using hammer to fix engine, knowing where to tap, £9,950. And I think that's the way that people have to look at it. It's like, it's what we've learned, what we've absorbed, you know. It sounds daft, but it's the books we read. So I know you read a lot, I know Ollie reads a lot. I've got hundreds of books, and I've spent hours and hours and days of my life reading them to absorb information. That's kind of the value. That's what people are paying for.
You think sometimes though, because I love that analogy, because I think that actually summarizes it. That's it for me. It's knowing exactly what to do and where to hit the pipes, or, you know, using that analogy. But I guess from the perspective of a client's perspective, quite often you do all the research, all the insights, there's all the competitor, the market overviews done by the strategy and the planning team and so on. But the eventual answer that you come up with, and the eventual maybe positioning, might be something quite simple. It might be something that's you know, I don't know, not groundbreaking necessarily in terms of what you come up with, but it's what it's needed to connect all the dots across the different pieces of work. And I wonder whether quite often that's part of the problem that the clients have, that they think, I could have come up with that myself, but you go like, but you didn't.
But you didn't, did you?
But you didn't.
That's the trick.
A solution and think, oh, we could have done that ourselves, because we can do that in any walk of life. There's lots of things out there that are some really simple little inventions or bits of tech or whatever they are. A wheel doesn't seem that hard, but we didn't come up with it first, and whoever did come up with it first is the one that's reaping the rewards for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it though, because I think that's what it makes me smile genuinely when the question comes up, when you get like, well, so why am I paying that much for that? We could have come up with that with ourselves. But you're like, well, does it work? Yes. Does everybody buy into it? Yes. Has it fixed the problem that you've got? Yes. Will you get 3, 4, 5 years of longevity out of the solution? Yeah. Well, I'd say we've done our job then, and we've justified the fee that we've proposed.
Yeah.
But again, on the digital side of things, Ollie, it's slightly different, I guess, because maybe it is more structured there in the sense of it's more output, and particularly if it's more of a, obviously campaigns are relatively tactical, so to speak. But I guess we see a different challenge there in terms of pricing and not necessarily the value aspect side of things, but more around project management and our time to do things, which I think is a separate challenge, but something that we do come across quite often again. What's your take on that? Because I guess from an intro perspective, we try to be very transparent with our billing, that we'll say, here's our third party cost for the advertising or whatever it may be, and here's our time and our project management fees, and this is how many hours we're going to spend on that project. And I personally consider that a more transparent breakdown, that we're saying time, expenses, so on and so on.
We be as granular as is practical, I would say. I think there's a lot of granularity where it becomes practical, because you can't really be realistic at the outset of a project about exactly how long you're going to spend doing exactly each thing. For example, you're not going to go down to a 20-minute breakdown within a quote.
Yep.
But realistically, that might end up being what happens with certain phases. So we try to be as transparent as possible, breaking things down into sub-phases. But there can raise questions about, you know, what's actually included in this specific phase, or can you break it down further?
Yeah.
And what you're raising as well is a certain area is really needed, or we don't like that line item, or can we get rid of that? And it's like, well, no, because it's in many cases integral to everything else happening.
But it's an interesting pricing thought process of, are you better just inflating all the individual line items and not putting project management on there as a time, because people don't like paying for project management, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it's my old days in finance, but in the sense of, I'd rather know what I'm paying for that project management, because I want to know how many hours I've got of those people, or what expertise is included in this quote.
And it's got that project management line, for example. You can look at that and go like, well, there's no output of that.
Exactly.
I know what for a design phase, I'm getting the designs of my website or solution or whatever it might be. I know what I'm getting from the development portion. I know what I'm getting from the testing. Although testing is another one where I think some people can sometimes raise a question.
Mm-hmm.
But project management in particular doesn't have any specific output outside of just making sure that everything else actually happens, that it happens when it needs to happen, that all the relevant people are kept up to date and informed and ticking along, and that all the project files are placed where they needed to be, and that all the project is fully documented so that people need to know where it's up to. So you actually start thinking about everything that goes into a project manager's job. There's a huge amount of work that needs to happen. And essential to making sure that anything happens is, it'd be like going rudderless otherwise. So it's definitely an essential cost, but like you say, it can sometimes result in people looking at a quote or an estimate, whatever it might be, and just thinking like, hang on a minute, that I don't like the sound of that one.
I think it is that. I think it is that point though, because it leaves it immediately open to challenge by procurement or by the client team to say, well, there's no output linked to it. But the output is that project being delivered on time, within scope, correctly, that it works. And I often wonder, you know, and I guess we're in the client shoes quite often with our suppliers who we work with and our bought-in arrangements. But I wonder whether, from the client's perspective, sometimes they undervalue or don't appreciate how much time we spend. So we all only have so many man hours available to us, despite how many hours you may choose to work in a week, whether it's 40, 80, more. You know, we all put the work in.
Available, aren't they? Really.
That's what I mean. So there's a certain cap, isn't there, on your actual availability of team, and then sometimes with the project side of things. And I know that, you know, John, you've worked at various other agencies and so on, but in the sense of quite often agencies' downfalls is over service. So in the sense of being absolutely consumed with no attached billable value, but
it's all like chasing the next big thing, isn't it? Well, we'll invest here because it'll come and it'll pay us back in the future, or it'll pay us back then. And
yeah, there was the guy I used to work with, you know, was used to talk about tiny acorns and big oak trees, and that's genuinely the analogy he always used. You know, this is an acorn. We've got to invest the time up front, but I don't know about you. I've not seen many of those acorns.
They don't tend to grow, do they? Funnily enough.
No, so I just mean you've got to be really strategic, I think, with where you invest your time, and we will do that. You know, we will go in, over invest in smaller opportunities where we think there's an opportunity for growth or service line growth or cross selling or upselling or just delivering a really good project. But I just think it's one of those ongoing debates that I have with myself in terms of when we do pull that budget together. Do you line item the project management? Do you wrap it into the fees? Would the quotes sail through?
I've seen it done in, like, you know, a multitude of creative and interesting ways. You know, from it being, there's a number, literally, this project, 50 grand.
Mm-hmm.
What's that made up of? It's 50 grand. Down to
I can't quote like that.
I know.
I'm laughing. I mean, that drives me insane. It just goes against every bone in my body to go for the one.
Me too. I think we do it the right way, but I think we do, you know, and I'm trying to think about the other ways I've experienced it.
Yeah.
Where project management, account management, whatever you want to call it, is charged as a percentage of the invoice total. So then you get into kind of really weird creative accounting to get where you want to get to.
Yeah.
I think our way is the right way, but it does lead you open to, I don't want, criticism is the wrong word here, but kind of
challenge, isn't it? Open to challenge. You feel like you have to.
And I think you then get into the territory of sometimes Dutch auctions with people where you're kind of going down to the lowest common denominator, and it's a race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You end up, sometimes, I certainly do, you get the feeling that people, you're kind of dealing with people who know the price of everything but the value of nothing. Mm-hmm. And they look very much in the moment rather than what's the long-term kind of benefits of what we're kind of investing in here.
I think I've been through the motions of almost finding it quite insulting at times that people don't value your time. So in the sense of, the most precious thing we've got here at the agency is our time and the expertise that we can offer people, our collective expertise. But there is a value to that. There's a value for every billable hour we spend on one project that we don't spend on another, or we work with one client on where, you know, arguably not at the neglect of another client, but you could be putting that time elsewhere. And I think I'm unashamedly would say to a client, you know, that there is a value to that time. There's a value to having those experts on the calls with you week in, week out, driving this process through and making sure that happens.
And I think that's where it comes down to our job, because I guess that's always going to happen, is we need to just be educational on that point, which is just explaining exactly what you just said there, to and not being willing to compromise our own time or deliverable based on, you know, negotiating too far down on what we're going to deliver.
Yeah, it's like Matt said earlier, it's kind of like, if you get to that point of, if you are getting into a price battle with someone, yeah, we all know there is always someone who will do it cheaper than you will. Always. Doesn't matter. There'll always be someone who'll do it cheaper. The problem is, are they going to solve that problem? Are they going to align everyone in the business? Are they going to get everyone on board? Are they going to find a solution that will answer everyone's problem? Probably not, because they're going to be putting you through and kind of, I guess, a sausage factory kind of process where it's going to be like just throwing it through as quick as possible to kind of create a profit out of it.
Yeah, the other thing with the time element, I guess, and that scans across both points from the value billing and the project management side of things, is knowing at the start of a project how much time management is going to be, how much project management or time is going to be required to find the solution. It's hard. So we can get, you can give a best estimate, and this is where agencies have to use their expertise, I think, to come up with the number. So if we say, right, that's going to be 50 hours, 100 hours, just picking some numbers out of thin air there, that's based on our previous experience of knowing typically this would take 50 hours or whatever it may be. But then typically, this is to a lot of agencies' downfalls that I worked with prior to being a BDB, the over-servicing statistic goes through the roof, because then you're hooked on the project, you've got to deliver it, you've still got to hit the same date when it's got to be done by. But if the client wants you on 10 extra calls and more,
How do you charge for them? Yeah.
You've just got to absorb it and take it on the chin, because what I don't believe in personally is going back to the well again and saying, oh, we've done an extra, you want us for an extra 15 hours here, or after the event, which, which was typical in the accountancy game, you'd go in for scope creep at the end. So at the end of a project, after you build them, you'd say, oh, this actually took double the time we thought it was going to take, therefore, you owe us X. And PwC were terrible for that. Overrun recovery, it was called. So you had to go in at the end of a project basically to try and see what you could get. And it was almost KPI'd on the managers to see what you could get out of it. Whereas if I was a client, that would royally frustrate.
Oh yeah, it puts you on the back foot, and it's a one step away from ending the relationship, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, because I think you want to have a no surprises approach to
but then I think that puts the agency at a huge disadvantage, and I think we're particularly lucky in that we work with clients over a long period of time, and I'd like to think they see us as, I'll use the P word, partners, but along with them for the journey, and kind of it's a more balanced relationship. But
sure,
that means that we've got to we have to be honest with our clients, which we are. If we say, look, this is creeping beyond the realms of where we initially all agreed.
Yeah.
And I think then when you're on that longer journey, you can do that. You can be honest and have that two-way conversation, can't you?
Yeah. No, completely.
Ironically, the job of the project manager really is key in terms of understanding what we're trying to achieve, what we've agreed to, and understanding what is in scope and therefore needs to be accommodated, even if that means we go above our initial time estimates to the benefit of the client, and what is out of that scope, and therefore what we need to have a just genuine, open, honest discussion and say, look, we can do it, but not within what we've already discussed, because it's not within that original plan.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's basic, but it's what you always end up going back to, isn't it? A robust scope of works alongside a granular budget, alongside a granular timings plan, should be the three core assets that protect all parties.
Signed off brief.
Yeah, but it should be the party that protects all parties against this kind of issue arising.
Yeah.
However, the number of projects you could probably count on one hand that have all those different documentations agreed at the outset, set in play, where you can refer back to them and say, hang on a minute, that is out of scope, that's a scope change, is rare, because normally the timings and the appetite of the client to get something started quicker means you're kind of already on the treadmill before those documents are signed off, quite typically, which I think is part of working in an agency as well. You can't say, well, let's wait 3 weeks while we pull all this together. But again, Ollie, echoing what you said there, I think the role of the importance of that robust project management, which again then leads for that's why there's a fee attached to it, because that's what ensures everything happens when it should happen.
If anything, it's the most important element. I think it's totally unrelated, but I think one of the biggest ironies I've ever come across is that it's the professional services industry. When I've worked and done marketing for pro services, they're the ones who least understand the concept of time.
Yeah.
Legal companies are absolutely the worst. They don't, well, why do I have to pay for that? Because that's how long it takes. There's a real irony to it.
Which is irony when they do timesheets in 6-minute intervals. So literally, so if you speak to your solicitors or your accountants, and I think it's changed. I think it's evolved a lot, even in the professional services side of things. I've been seeing it. The more modern consultative accountancy firms these days don't operate in quite that way. But I think it's been a struggle for them to even adapt to the new kind of era of, I can't bill you for every single 6 minutes that I charge to my timesheet, and that typically very much was the case in the past. So, no, it's interesting. But I think on the pricing side of things, it's one of those. and maybe it's knowing your client, maybe it's knowing what they want and how they, and we've got good relationships with our clients.
And valuing what you do as an agency, isn't it? And I think that's, I've worked in agencies where there hasn't been that value placed on the IP within the business, the intelligence of the people in the business, and it's become very much a project based. Right, well, we'll discount this, we'll charge 50% of what we should be just to chase the revenue.
Yeah.
And then it devalues the entire kind of proposition of the agency, of the work they're doing, start to get treated badly by the time there isn't that kind of collaborative spirit.
Yeah.
Well, entering into that kind of situation is quite dangerous. Let's say we've got a website project for somebody who we believe it's going to be £25,000 or euros or whatever of time to deliver. If we say, well, we've got a bit of availability at the minute and our devs are free, so let's do it for half that price, just to get something coming in. We're entering into something that I think we're all going to regret further down the line, and the client might be initially happy with that price, but once time when our devs are all busy and that project's still going on, which one's going to get the focus, which one's going to get the attention? It's going to be the projects that are paying the I guess non-discounted fee that are going to get more of the focus. I don't mean that's obviously not an ideal thing, because you've entered into an agreement and you deliver on what you've agreed on. But there's always going to be a bit of that natural bias and almost resentment, I believe, in that relationship. So it is important that we understand and value what it is that we know we're bringing to the table, what we can deliver, and price accordingly.
I think so, because it's an interesting point in the sense of discounted rates, because we get asked that quite a lot, don't we, in the sense of, and typically this is some newer clients we're working with, I would say, rather than established relationships where we've got clear structures and processes and protocols in place for the billing arrangements. But quite often they'll get, oh no, they're your rates, but can you give us some discounted rates? And you go like, well, no, they are the rates, but they're also fair. They're not particularly expensive in the marketplace. We're transparent with the billing, we're transparent with our hours, we're transparent with the work that we do. But you'll always get, I guess, the people that just want to feel like they've got a saving. So then it goes against my nature, I think, in terms of overly inflating the rates to then know you're going to discount them, because that doesn't feel like an honest relationship, and it feels like a bit of one-upmanship on the way through, I guess. Whereas I'd much rather say these are the rates, they're fair, and we'll be transparent with our billing arrangements. But
and you've immediately devalued and put yourself on the back foot of becoming a supplier rather than a partner. Value.
I've been involved in a few projects in my career, client side, where we've gone with that discounted rate option. And I don't mean somebody that's given us a fair price is lower than somebody else's. I mean, they've massively undercut things because they've wanted to win the business, or because they've had that availability and they've cut the rates. And I know this is anecdotal, but none of those has turned out well. One of the projects that was delivered a year late, another one that was a project after a year and a half. I think we basically filed for breach of contract and went with a different supplier. And I know we've, from B2B's point of view, we've started on a few occasions helped out clients that have been in a similar situation where we basically had to run a project where they've sunk an amount of money in that seems way too low for what was the original scope of work. And obviously we don't know the ins and outs of what happened in those situations, into those initial discussions with other suppliers. But based on the cost that they were paying and the work that was given, it just seems like there's a massive disparity. And then we've had to come and step in towards the end of the project and get things back on track.
One that always sticks in my mind, Ollie, is when we were looking at implementing a CRM for BDB here. So when we talk about that fee structure of going in high and then offering a big discount, for me that creates like a real lack of trust in the relationship, because it feels like they were trying to taking advantage of you in the first place for the first price. But without naming names, I'm sure you know who I mean, Ollie, but in the sense that they started off at virtually double or 2.5 times the cost, and then the more we pushed back and the more we said, no, it's just not in our budget range, we don't want to invest that much yet, they go from £60,000 down to 20-odd thousand pounds, let's say, for the exact same package, and the exact same solution. There was no change in it at all, other than we pushed back quite a few times. But I guess maybe in that SaaS model, maybe that's a more common approach for pricing.
A bit of a strange one. I suppose it's going back to more of that value billing kind of thing, because the actual price for somebody getting on board with a true SaaS product is pretty much flick a switch.
Yeah.
some types of software, including CRM, can require more configuration.
Yeah.
But a lot of the SaaS product is literally flick a switch, and then you can go and use it as you want. And in that case, you can start to wonder what you're paying for, but and question if you should have a lower fee or if you can get a lower fee. If the company at the end, the supplier there, starts reducing their prices again, it just starts, questioning, is it worth it? Is there a good trust there? Do they know what their product's worth, or are they trying it on?
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that in terms of, think about things like car dealerships these days, at least within the UK. We're moving away from, here's a figure, let's negotiate it down now, to just tell me the actual price, and that's what I'll know. I'll have to pay.
I mean, there's a great saying, isn't there? And it's never true where it says, like, buy cheap, buy twice.
Yeah.
And particularly in this sort of thing, it's like, to your point, Matt, the amount of times that we've come in and we've had to unpick previously created problems.
Oh yeah.
They've gone from below par solution. And it's just ridiculous when you go through the same process again with someone.
I think it'll be an ongoing, not issue. It's just always going to be a consideration how you price, and I suppose for me, it's just being transparent and upfront and honest at the outset. And you're going to experience different people, aren't you? And maybe sometimes, maybe it's a nationality point, maybe it's the way they price in different countries and the way they negotiate. Certain people just want to have a negotiation, don't they, to feel like they've got a saving. But it's certainly not the way I would prefer to do things. I suppose from a BDB perspective, I'd just rather be upfront, transparent, and say this is it. But you know, when you enter in an engagement with us, you'll get it. You'll get what you want when you wanted it, and you'll be pleased.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like there are some people who, and it goes across the board, a lot of services and products. It's not right for everyone.
Yep.
Some people don't need to buy, I don't know, a Rolls Royce. They only need a Skoda or whatever. I think sometimes there's disparity in that. The expectation versus what you think you're buying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, thanks very much, guys. That was interesting. Good to have a chat through that topic. I'm sure we will revisit time and time again as the years progress. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Feel free to check out www.b2bknowledge.com, our online ungated content hub, helping our contacts, prospects, and clients navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. And the upcoming issue is the talent issue, which will be released shortly. So a really interesting edition all around attracting and retaining talent and a multi-generational workforces. It touches on loads of really interesting aspects. So I'd encourage people to engage with that. But that's it for us this week, and we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.